Feasibility Study and Facilities Program for the Deaf Culture Center of New Mexico. Report number 1, Goals and Criteria. Introduction. Why do we have this report? The report is a progress update for the New Mexico Commission for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing, the DCC Board, and the State of New Mexico, which has the contract. This is a summary of work to date in the first phase of the DCC feasibility study. How did we get this information? The planning team has spent several weeks interviewing people who are somehow connected to the DCC or who are interested in the project. From these discussions, we collected a list of the kinds of spaces that will be needed to serve all the different activities that might happen in the DCC. We also looked at other DCC facilities around the country. We want to compare those other projects to see what kinds of spaces they include, how they were paid for, and who owns them. What will we do with the information? The planning team will use this information to create the next step toward identifying building and site sizes so that we can start looking for property. We will be able to tell exactly how big the building should be, how many rooms it should have, and where we should look for a site. We start this process by setting goals. We wrote these goals for the project after speaking with a lot of people about the DCC. Goal 1. Create a building that will be a cultural, recreational, educational, and social center for the deaf, deafblind, and hard of hearing communities in Albuquerque. Spaces that might be included are an auditorium, meeting rooms for clubs, a museum or a library, a restaurant or a kitchen, a gym or game room, classrooms, or offices for services providers. Goal 2. The building will be a statewide center for the deaf, deafblind, and hard of hearing communities throughout New Mexico by having technological connections to outlying communities. Ideas for this include installing new communication technology in all gathering spaces, have ways for group events so that people in other areas of New Mexico can connect into them, like meetings for NMAD. Goal 3. Choose a safe central location in Albuquerque. The building should be located near bus lines, near rail runner train depots, near community centers or parks, and be within walking distance to shopping areas. Goal 4. Design a building that expresses the unique needs of the deaf, deafblind, and hard of hearing communities. Ideas include a contemporary look that will appeal to deaf youth, universal design principles so that the building will be accessible to everyone, open, unobstructed spaces that provide visual access for people who use sign language or who lip read. Goal 5. Have apartments for different groups of people. Ideas include having independent and assisted living residences for deaf, deafblind, and hard of hearing senior citizens. Having training apartments for people to learn independent living skills. Apartments for young people and young families. Goal 6. Financial feasibility. Operating costs must be paid for by money that can be reasonably acquired, and the funds must be ongoing. Options for funds include renting event spaces to the general public, rent office space for compatible agencies and organizations, include regular rent apartments for deaf people that can afford them. Goal 7. Build spaces that are flexible and adaptable for many uses. Ideas are that one space could be used for many purposes. Movable partitions can create adjustable sized spaces. Goal 8. Design a building that will protect the environment and reduce operating costs. Ideas for this goal include water-saving plumbing fixtures and landscaping, daylighting of occupied spaces, energy-saving lighting, heating, and cooling. Goal 9. The building will be developed in phases. The first phase will include spaces that are most necessary and most affordable. The second phase will include space that would be good to have. The final phase would include spaces that would be nice to have in the future. Similar facilities. Apache ASL Trails in Tempe, Arizona. This building is mostly apartments. It has some space for private businesses on the first floor. There are no cultural, educational, social, or recreational spaces. The project was built through a partnership between a nonprofit organization called the Deaf Senior Citizens Coalition and a private developer. The developer owns it now, and it will gradually become owned by the nonprofit organization. The developer paid for the construction and will be reimbursed through rent. The Greater Los Angeles Deaf Community Center. This facility has many community center functions and also some apartments for deaf senior citizens. A nonprofit organization called the Greater Los Angeles Agency on Deafness owns this building. Operating money comes from rent of spaces and apartments. Money to purchase the building came from government funds and private grants and donations. The DCC in Olathe, Kansas. This is a museum and event space. It has a kitchen and offices. It is run by a private advocacy foundation called the Deaf Advocacy Foundation. The project was built and is run by private donations and grants. The Sanderson Center. This is a large community center that is the headquarters for the Utah Division of services to the deaf and hard of hearing. Government agencies own and run this building. The spaces are used by the general public as well as the deaf community. Water Tower View Apartments. This building is similar to the Apache ASL trails, except that it is all residential. It is a good model for how to build apartments for deaf senior citizens. Canadian Deaf Culture Center. This building was a historic warehouse in downtown Ontario, Canada. It was renovated to become a culture center. It includes event spaces, an art gallery, and meeting rooms. A non-profit organization called the Canadian Cultural Society of the Deaf own and run this building. Money to purchase and renovate this building came from private donations and historic tax credits. The Ed Roberts Campus. This building has a very large public meeting space. All of the rooms in this building are multi-purpose. The project was funded by government money and is run by a coalition of non-profit organizations that advocate for people with disabilities. Rental income supports the operation of this building. Next steps. With the approval of the steering committee, during the next month, ARC will identify building and site sizes so that we can start looking for property. We will conduct a workshop with the steering committee after we put all of that information together. In November, we will work on preparing for the first town hall meeting.